very interesting night of Indaba, where the discussion is really about understanding the repair campaign and its objectives with guest Fiona Compton. And of course, the feature discussion is Decolonizing the Mind, the relevance of the works of Frantz Fanon in the modern Caribbean with special guest Dr. Asha Kambon. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Shabaka Kambon, Dr. Fergus, and Renee Francois.
All right. Good evening, Brother Ruskin. Good evening, and good evening to the listeners on Talk City 91.1 FM and on YouTube and Facebook. The Emancipation Support Committee's program in Indaba is on live. And of course, we have another exciting program for you. Good evening, my brother, Shabaka.
Dr. Fergus, how are you?
Not too well, not too well. I'm still fighting this demon cold I have.
That's one way to put it. All right. But we had a very interesting weekend. You know, it's the launch of the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series, and we had one of those somewhat rock star intellectuals in Dr. Lewis Gordon come to join us, you know, and a lot of people came out just to hear Dr. Gordon, and you know, no one was really disappointed. But we're gonna go in and examine his contribution forensically tonight on Indaba. So you won't want to miss out. Of course, Dr. Gordon launched the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series with a discussion on that area of his expertise, Frantz Fanon, the great Caribbean luminary from Martinique. And boy, did he have a lot to share. So we're gonna get to that. But before we go there, we're gonna talk reparations with a member of a regional non-governmental organization involved in this important area in the 21st century. And of course, this is Dr. Fergus's area. So we're going to hear what they have to say. And I'm sure, Doctor, you will want to find out, you'll want to engage them about the work that they are doing.
I hope you would want to engage them from a layman's perspective, and that might perhaps better, you know, extract information that the public might be interested in. Because
well, I think what we're looking at here. I mean, I think where the public will be interested in these issues, because the public has always wanted to know how do they get involved in this. You know, what Dr. Hilary Beckles has described as the important struggle of the 21st century, the reparation struggle. How does the public get involved? And I think we're going to get some answers from this sister from the repair.
Well, let me just put this in context. The TRC, we simply refer to them. We have the CRC, the Caribbean Reparations Commission. We have the TRC, the Repair Campaign. As you said, it's a non-governmental organization. It is the main partner with the CRC in the pursuit of reparations. There is a major difference in perspectives where the CRC focuses mainly on getting reparations from the imperial powers, the colonizers of the region. The TRC is engaged more in terms of the local situation. So they focus more in terms of working with other NGOs interested in reparations. And of course, they should be working with government as well, perhaps eventually. But they have a plan, a manifesto sort of a plan, you know, a very extensive plan that covers perhaps every aspect of the harms which were done to both indigenous peoples and African peoples as well. They do touch on the broader issue of colonialism, but those are the two main areas that they focus on. There is a manifesto. That manifesto was in fact discussed by the Trinidad and Tobago National Reparations Committee, but it has been revised because of the suggestions and inputs that we made, and it is still to be signed off on as such. So it's still a working document from our perspective, but these documents are multiplied across the Caribbean. Each of the territories in the Caribbean would have had a manifesto such as the one which we know about. So it was a massive piece of work that the repair campaign would have done to prepare individualized manifestos to suit the peculiar circumstances in the various colonies. So broadly speaking, that is what this is about. It focuses more on the local the sort of internal dynamics of reparations rather than the external, where the CRC, where the energy of the CRC is more directed. So basically that is it.
So it sounds interesting. I'm excited. I want to learn more.
Well, we want a bit more, plenty more. So we have one of the officials of the repair campaign here with us this evening. And
Yes,
of course, good
everybody.
evening and welcome, Ms. Joy Compton. Do I have the name right?
Fiona Compton.
Fiona. Fiona
Yes.
Compton, who is a cultural ambassador, a historian at the New York Caribbean, and you will tell us a little bit about what this New York Caribbean is before we start on the repair campaign.
Sure.
And we are looking at the goals and objectives of the repair campaign and the activities they are involved in. As I said, the repair campaign focuses on different territories. So we get the umbrella perspective, and then we would deal with what do they have in store for Trinidad and Tobago.
All
So
right.
welcome Fiona to Indaba, and let us have your initial input into the program, into this segment, this discussion that we are having. Tell us a little bit about the Know Your campaign and then the repair campaign itself.
Okay. Okay, well, first and foremost, thank you all for having me tonight. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And so yes, I am a cultural ambassador. I run Know Your Caribbean, which is the largest platform in the world for Caribbean history and culture. And it was birthed from the reason why I started this platform, which has a global reach, is because I felt cheated. Growing up in St. Lucia, and I grew up in a very Caribbean proud family, a very regional proud family. And it was, it wasn't until I was, a big woman, as you say, a hardback woman, that I really understood the um, the importance of the Haitian Revolution. And I felt like, okay, how, and what happened was I had come across a Jamaican radio station that was speaking about the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And they started to say a lot of very disparaging things, that it was because of voodoo and so on. And this is why they were deserving of this and so on. And then I saw Sir Hilary's essay about the Haitian Revolution and understanding the depths of that history as to how Haiti was impoverished by Europe, the importance of the revolution. I was like, wow, there was actually like a nation that did it. And look at how we view them now. And so that feeling of being cheated from my own Caribbean history, understanding the identity of my own Caribbean neighbors, is why I started Know Your Caribbean. So even though I am from St. Lucia, I consider myself a daughter of the Caribbean soil. And I feel there has been such a strong disconnect that we are, and my father always used to say that we are connected by the Caribbean Sea, we're not separated by it. And so that's basically the mantra of the platform, where we have these discussions of connecting history and culture and kind of removing that academic lens, because I feel it's people say that Caribbean people don't care about history. We don't care about them things. Them young people don't care about them things, but it's not that. I think it's how we present it, and it's removing that wall of academia and making it be relatable. And so Know Your Caribbean is run by me, but it's a platform of discussion where somebody from Curacao can say, Oh my God, y'all do this. Y'all do this in Montserrat as well. This is amazing. And somebody will say this thing happened in Jamaica. Yeah, we do that too in Tobago. And we call it the same thing. And this kind of community is just has been so inspiring to see how we are so connected. So I'm very proud of what has come from New York Caribbean.
Yeah,
And
and Fiona, you're using the social media platforms for Know Your Caribbean.
yes, so we're on Instagram. We have a podcast that's listened to in, I think it's 175 countries, and we have like I said, a global reach of up to 16 million people a month. So it's through Instagram. We're on TikTok growing. We have about 50,000 followers on TikTok, so still emerging. And but yeah, we do it from a social media standpoint where we. I also do lectures and stuff like that, but the platform that's the platform.
Right.
So
Okay, let me ask you this question that really not directly related to the topic at hand.
yes,
I was editing a piece of work today, and I came across the name of the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, John Compton.
yes,
Are you related in any way, or perhaps just related by history? Maybe.
that's my father.
Is that fact?
Yes. So when I said I grew up in a very Caribbean proud household, that's what I mean. It's because of with my father.
Well,
Okay, so listeners, we have the daughter of a former Prime Minister of St. Lucia here with us this evening, Prime Minister John Compton of St. Lucia. Okay,
Yes.
so you have your own campaign, your own NGO, New York Caribbean. So tell us, what is your position or your relationship to the repair campaign?
Right. So I've been working with Repair for about 2 years. So basically, it's from since it's early infancy, when they were trying to find a way of how we can create an outreach to connect the Caribbean in the conversation for reparations. And so what it is, it's a non-profit organization, and it is to connect the CARICOM communities in order the objective is to support the pre-existing reparations communities like the CRC. So it's not that we are coming here to invent the wheel. No, we are here to support all the people who have been working all of these past decades in the campaign for reparations. And in order to connect all of this, so St. Vincent can talk to St. Lucia some more. So we can have some young people in Grenada talking to people in Montserrat about it, and somebody in Antigua, and creating that connection and to encourage people to sign in solidarity. So we are on a current goal to get 100,000 signatures in order to strengthen the campaign when we are going to the various British and European parliaments. That is the goal, for us to have like a unified force. And look, we have 100,000 signatures that we are aiming to attain by August 1st, and then looking to get 1 million signatures by next year, so that it's more than talk, that we actually show in solidarity. So this is what the Repair campaign is doing, is supporting the already existing incredible historians, activists, um, economists who have been working so hard to create things like the CARICOM 10-point plan.
So tell us, you have built your plan, your manifesto, I like to call it, around the 10-point plan of the CRC,
Mhm.
but you engage more in the perhaps the more personal kind, individual impact areas. That is the areas that individuals can say, look, I want reparations because, of the psychological damage that was done to me, of the dispossession of salaries and wages, and therefore, the impact also of dispossession of land, and the deprivation of all sorts of opportunities to acquire land, even criminalizing efforts to acquire land and so on. So,
Yes.
what is the significant difference? I know you talk complementing the CLC, but in, so we understand how you connect, but
Mhm.
what is the unique aspect of the repair campaign's work for reparation?
With what it is, it's that it's accessing resource and using, because one of the things that we have to be honest about when we're looking at the various groups who have been petitioning for reparations, there is a disconnect with the general public, because you'll find there is a certain age demographic of people. Then you also find it's also a lot of men are involved, and then not that many women, and not many young people. So how do we make it something where all the young people know what the 10-point plan is, and kind of like like taking away that wall of separation where people can speak about it openly and speak about it confidently. Because, so for example, if you go on, say, my Instagram, when I start to share posts about reparations, so for example, in 2023 I shared a video of President Ali's conversation with Good Morning Britain. I don't know if you had seen it, but it was about reparations, and the journalists were. It was one of the most disrespectful conversations I had seen with a leader of a nation, and the way they spoke to him, but he handled it beautifully. And the amount, it reached 2.4 million views just on my platform alone, and there were thousands of comments. So repair is basically an extension of that, where, because at the end of the day, let's be real, social people are on their phones. Everybody on their phone now. Okay. So when we're having these conversations of reparations that are happening in universities, in town halls and things like that, young people not come in, they're not going to come to the meetings. That's the reality of it all. They don't, maybe they in principle believe in it, or say yes, they think it's a good idea, but they're not going to commit themselves to physically come to these meetings. Or some of them don't even feel that I can walk into UE and go to a lecture about reparations. But you
Yeah.
know what? They will comment about that video about President Ali because it's within their comfort zone, and they feel confident to engage in it in that space. So what Repair is doing is that, yes, it's an online platform. So we have the petition where we are gathering the signatures in order to present and show our solidarity as a unified force within CARICOM. And then, also looking at how the difficulty. So for me, for example, I'm based in St. Lucia, and I have found it. And me, I'm a historian. I love history. I when I meet historians are like celebrities to me, especially if I've read your work, and I'm like, oh my god, you're amazing. That's me personally, and that's me as a history fanatic. But what about and I have found it difficult to be able to access or understand the works of the individual reparations committees of each CARICOM country. I
Fiona,
have found it difficult to find their information.
Fiona, I think you're absolutely correct. You've touched on a very important point there.
Mhm.
And I think we could even go one step further and say that the media does not carry these conversations either. They don't
No.
give it, the Caribbean regional media does not give these conversations any prominence.
Mhm.
And I would even go one step further and say that our tertiary institutions, I'm not just talking about University West Indies now, but even outside of that, the other tertiary institutions don't have discussions and debates. They don't invite the relevant, luminaries in the area to come and speak to their students, to come and have discussions, debates.
Mhm.
This is not part of the mainstream dialogue in the region.
No, it's not.
Of course, we could even go one step further and say that the way that our history syllabus is constructed is actually in such a manner that it undermines our efforts to build a Caribbean population, to gain a majority population that is pro reparation.
Mm-hmm.
Really where we are. And I'm telling you this now as a teacher, having to engage students all the time,
Mm.
14, 15, 16, who are doing their secondary school history work and so on. You can see according to Dr. Tony Martin, nowhere in any of the books do you genuinely get a sense of the horror of enslavement.
No.
And then and that's one side of it, but it could get pretty extreme where teachers ask students to write about the pros and the cons of the genocide of indigenous people, the pros and the cons of enslavement.
Mm.
These are real exercises that Caribbean students are confronted with up to today.
Boy.
So we do have all kinds of challenges across the spectrum.
Mm.
And groups like yours, there is definitely room for people like yourself, for campaigns such as yours, to utilize the media that is engaging young people to bring them closer to this conversation. By the way, let me ask you about your own country of St. Lucia, because
Mhm.
I was there a few years ago doing some work, and we interviewed a politician in your country. I will not call names. I have
Okay.
refused to publish his interview. But he said on camera, and I do have the film to prove it, that it's a shame that the British were the ones that won out in St. Lucia in the end, because the narrative in St. Lucia, when you ask the average St. Lucian or those in authority about the history of your country, they don't
Mhm.
talk about the great revolts. They don't talk
No.
about it as a center of, so the African resistance, the indigenous resistance, those things are completely erased from the conversation. And
Well,
what we get is 7 times British, 7 times
7 time
French.
French. Yep.
The St. Lucians repeat that all the time. You say, what else do
Yes.
you know about your history? Seven
Nothing.
times, 7 times, nothing else besides
Yes.
that. That is St. Lucian history. And this politician said that it was unfortunate that Britain won out the last time, because otherwise they could have been like Martinique, St. Lucia, could have been better off.
Yes. Yes.
Martinique and Guadeloupe under French colonial tutelage up to today, under French
Yes.
colonial rule. So I have that politician on camera. I just don't
Yes.
think it's fair, since that wasn't the centerpiece of the conversation. We're talking about other things, for me to broadcast his words across the region. But I want to say that, unfortunately, we still have people entering leadership positions, not just the rank and file masses of the population, which is reflected in places like Jamaica. In Jamaica in 2011, they did a national survey, and something like 60% of the population said they would have been better off under colonial rule.
Boy.
You could still find that kind of sentiment. Of course, it's decreasing in the Caribbean now, but you still have people attaining high office who have that kind of mentality. So we do have a lot of work to do. And what are you doing in St. Lucia to address
Mhm.
the issue there?
Right. So I would say that that politician, he's not an anomaly. There are many people who think that way, because we have this perception that Matic, I can see Matic from my house. They have euros, they have nice road, they have this, they have that, whatever. And then so I grew up thinking the same thing. And then of course now um befriending great people from Martinique. I think the universe just sends me amazing people to my life from different Caribbean countries, and in understanding the very difficult relationship that Martinique and Guadeloupe have with France. And if you find out about all the protests and the revolts and the difficulties, and understanding that element of it, but we still have that very Eurocentric history in St. Lucia. Yes, 7 time British, 7 time French. We don't talk about the Negma War, which are our Maroons. We don't talk about our revolution. All of these things, we are just slowly pulling it out. So myself, as a historian, I do talks, I do things in St. Lucia. I'm very active in our carnival, which has been totally hypersexualized, and there has been a very strong removal of, like our African identity and history of resistance in carnival. So these things are important to me as well. So there are all of those things that I'm personally engaged in. But going back to repair, it's when we're speaking when you're talking about yourself as a teacher, right? So say you could say, hey students, the CRC is having this amazing lecture or whatever on Thursday at 6 p.m. I whatever. I know a lot of your students, some will come, a lot will not. But if you send them something that's online or say, look at this cool Instagram post, look at this thing here, they will be quicker to engage. Because it's the youth now are receiving information in short bursts. All of us are suffering from attention deficits. If somebody send you an email with 4 paragraphs, you're like, oh my God, why you send me this long thing there, essay now, right? So of doing things in short bursts, we have to, in order for the campaign to continue, because I remember Sir Hilary Beckles had done an amazing lecture, and he was talking about how he had gone to South Africa for this conference, and he was saying that they're waiting for the elder Pan-Africanists, the real people who began these campaigns to die, because the young people don't care anymore. So we have to reshape how it is we present, this campaign for reparations, and we do have to do things through social media. That is how things are having that reach. When you look at now, people, people may look down at things like TikTok and Instagram as frivolous foolishness, but this is where everyone is. This is where everyone
Okay,
is.
Fiona, I want to address something before we reach the top of the half hour. Right?
Yes.
I said at the beginning that the TLC's plan, your manifesto brings reparations to the people as such, like NGOs, other social groups. But you are also strongly supporting the CLC's demand for reparations from Britain and other European powers. So tell us about that other dimension. For example, there is a current plan to support the CLC, that is for the TLC, your
Mm-hmm.
organization repair campaign, to
Mm-hmm.
support, well, more than support, to finance the CLC's visit to Britain and Brussels. That
Yes.
is an ongoing plan. So tell us about that kind of support, that other dimension where you directly engage the colonial powers now, not just organization in the Caribbean, but the imperial powers. Tell us a little bit about that aspect of the TLC's work.
Okay. So with like I mentioned earlier, with repair, we're not here to reinvent the wheel. Okay. We are working very hard in respecting the work of the existing um, communities, groups, historians, the people in the CRC who have been doing this work. And we're working with understand we're starting to understand that things are very nuanced. So we cannot come and just step in front and say, hey, look, repair rich, and we want to bring your hand there and whatever. We have to understand that we're stepping into a space, into a pre-existing space where these people, they are not, we are not, our movements to have these discussions with the British and the European parliaments is not a new thing. Okay, this has been something that has been going for decades, and you know that. So we are here to support the CRC in whatever decision making that they want to do. This is what we are here to do. One of the things that we are doing as part of the support system for the CRC is that we are inviting advocates to join the repair campaign. This is something where they are going to be financially supported. These are paid roles, where because we don't want to be asking people to come and commit their time and their labor and for not to be paid. Okay, because I think a lot of the times our advocates, our activists get burnt out. So this is one of the differences with repair. There is a resource. I cannot state the size of the resource, but there is a resource where we are going to be paying advocates of many different age groups, so it's intergenerational advocates to support the CRC in whatever it is they're doing. The CRC is a conglomerate of many different countries, many different experiences. So, for example, in St. Lucia, our reparations committees have a different age length, different size to say Trinidad. Because even speaking to one of my really good friends from Trinidad, he says Trinidad has two reparations committees. you can tell me if I'm wrong or right about that. So even understanding the nuance within each different country as
So
well.
just to correct you, there's only one national reparations committee in Trinidad
Mhm.
and Tobago.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
even Tobago is part of the National Reparations Commission.
okay. So then,
There are
well,
other organizations that are keenly interested in reparations, but there
yes,
is only one National Reparations
nationally
Commission.
recognized one. Gotcha. Well, so but even looking at within each country having their each individual identity and that forming into the CRC. So one of the things we want to be very clear is that Repair Campaign is supporting the whatever decision that the CRC goes with within that. So we have to be very mindful of the sensitivities of all the many different personalities, the many different um, individual things that are happening within this movement that is the CRC. Whilst that is happening, we are encouraging people to sign in solidarity because we need to get to these 100,000 signatures. We are encouraging people to join the Repair Campaign as advocates for their work and for their time. They will be compensated. And this is what we are focusing on right now while supporting the movement of the CRC.
Okay, we have to close the segment now. So, in your closing remarks, just tell our listeners how can they get in touch with the Repair Campaign in
Mhm.
order to make an input, to make a difference in
Yes.
the whole challenge for reparations. That struggle has been ongoing, as we know, for over 200 years. And
Easy
how
peasy.
can they get involved? The youths in particular. The
Yes,
youths are
that's
very
exactly what we
concerned that
want.
they are not involved, they are on the margin. So tell us how they can get involved, how they can contact you, and how they can make a difference.
That's exactly who we want, especially the youths and them. People who are social media creators. They could be people who have like really good creative ideas, and we want to work with them to bring out the best in their work where they can feel seen. Because of the importance of the campaign is we want Caribbean people to feel seen. I think in this conversation, a lot of our as the young people do not feel seen in this conversation and they don't understand what the 10-point plan is. They think reparations is you get money in your hand. It's not, it doesn't work like that. But it is benefiting you and our community on a whole, right? So best way, repaircampaign.org is our website. We have all the information that's needed. You can sign in solidarity on there. Instagram, Repair Campaign, and that's the two easiest places. Yes, we are growing on TikTok and Facebook and all of those things, but the repaircampaign.org and Repair Campaign on Instagram, all of the links and information, and we are super responsive as well on social media. We have a whole media kit and everything, so people can get in touch with us that way. So we encourage people to join us as advocates, and please sign in solidarity. 100,000 signatures is nothing when you think the CARICOM community is 19 million people. So that is really, really a very, very small goal, which we think is very achievable.
Now, Fiona, I know we're just about out of time, but I'll tell you that the next time we get a chance to talk to you, I'll be keen to talk to you, about your own personal context as the daughter of the former founding father of St. Lucia, because these founding fathers, whether it was Manley, Williams, Barrow, across the region, they were progressive in some regards, but something like reparations would have been something that they would have looked upon with a certain degree of suspicion.
Right.
And so to see the children of this generation, engaging the struggle at this time is interesting, and I'd be curious to hear some more about that personal engagement with dad about these subjects.
Absolutely. I'm happy to come back anytime.
All right. Thank you, Fiona. Thanks for joining
Thank
us
you so
tonight
much
here
for
on
having me.
Indaba.
Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking to you all.
Lots of love. Take care. Yes, doctor, you still there? I, I, yeah, no, listen, I mean, I gotta tell you, it would have been a very interesting conversation to have with Fiona. to look back at the founding fathers in the Caribbean across the board, to have that conversation about, the extent to which they were progressive and the extent to which they would have been, looked at issues like reparations, with a critical eye, coming from the colonial educational experience that they would have had, that would have been manifest in some of the policy decisions that they made while they were in office. That conversation, to me, is something that I wish we had time to really engage tonight. And of course, I would have wanted to find out from her, if she had engaged Manley's children and Williams's children and some of the other children from the founding fathers, and what and how that community felt about these issues. These are all fascinating subjects for me. But we're going to leave that there. And of course, we thank Fiona for joining us tonight and for introducing the repair campaign to our audience here on Indaba. And we look forward to working with them in the future on what appears to me to be quite a noble and important effort around the reparations work that is happening in the region. And now, Dr. Fergus, we move on to the second segment of our program. If I'm not mistaken, we're going to be talking to Dr. Asha Kambon about decolonizing the mind. And of course, this issue comes out of, or it really is a review of the lecture that took place on the weekend, the first of the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series, the launch, which is always an auspicious affair. We try to get one of the well-known, globally esteemed intellectuals to come in and present on that occasion. And of course, this time it was Professor Lewis Gordon, an expert of Fanon. And there we have Dr. Kambon. Welcome.
Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, Shabaka. Good evening, Dr. Fergus.
Good evening, Sister Asha. Good evening and welcome again. Of course, you, as I always say, you're not just a guest, but you're a host as well on this program. And used to be, and sometimes you still, of course, hold the fort for us. So welcome. Welcome to the program this evening. And,
I think we
very
can
interesting.
All agreeing that that we had a brilliant lecture. We started on a good note in the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series. We had a good turnout in audience, in-house at the UTT auditorium at Napa, and we had quite a good engagement with across the world via social media and YouTube and what have you. So we live streamed to a decent audience, and we had a good turnout for a lecture in 2025. So that to me is a success. And of course, the feedback has been positive. So that's where we can begin. And now, having said that, though, let's get into the meat of the matter.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay, first, I should say that the way in which I understand we're going to structure the discourse for the next 4 sessions of Indaba is that we're going to look at different aspects of decolonizing the mind. And I think that what I prepared for this evening's is just a little clip from Professor's presentation on Sunday afternoon that addresses one aspect of Fanon's thoughts on decolonizing the mind. So what I think I'd like us to do is to listen first, look and listen to Professor Gordon's presentation of just this first one little aspect, but I think it is quite a fundamental aspect of Fanon's thought, and it really kind of, I felt when I heard it, I said, it's something that households should be talking about. It's something that we should be talking about with the teachers and the students. It's something we should be talking about with policymakers. So let's see if other people feel the same way I did, that maybe this is one thought from Fanon that we could capture out of Doc's presentation. And what we'll try to do over the next 3 other sessions is pull out another, and another. So at least by the end of the 4 sessions, we would have highlighted at least 4 components of Fanon's thinking in relation to the notions of decolonizing the mind. So Renee,
Yeah, and just let me say that although the Africa report would be dealing with Algeria next week, is to complement the discussions on Fanon's ideas on decolonizing the mind. So I'm going to look at the Algerian War of Independence, the Algerian Revolution.
Wonderful.
So that's the Africa report that would be on next week as well.
Oh, excellent. So then we really have some additional material to talk about. Okay, so if Renee can please give us that little clip. It's not that long, but it should guide us in our discussions thereafter.
To be the mayor of Fort-de-France under the communist ticket. He also formed a football club with his brothers. And, you know, if you look at the football clubs then, since this is being streamed, for those who don't, the rest of the world call it football. The US, they call it soccer. So this team, a lot of the teams had colonial names, you know, like the Settlers team, the Golden this and that. But Fanon had a name for his team with his brothers. The team was Assault. You could imagine those games. Well, the Settlers Club, come on, but Assault is kicking there. And they were brutal. He did, after that, as you all know, go to France. He was a veteran, and he at first went to study dentistry. There's a lot, by the way, in the stories in between, but it's because of limited time I want to get into his thought. Because part of colonizing the mind is to think that Black people only have biographies. We don't have ideas. So I'm going to talk about his ideas, but for some people I thought they would like some context. He at first went to study dentistry, and I used to make a joke. The joke I used to make was, oh man, could you imagine if he had become a dentist? The kind of revolutionary jokes. You're getting to the root of the problem, you know? But I stopped making that joke. I was speaking in Nairobi one time. I was invited by Feroz Manji. And Feroz Manji, a stalwart, revolutionary, all kinds of things on the African continent. He's from Kenya, did all kinds of stuff in the UK. He's now in Canada. At the time in Nairobi, he was like, what's wrong with a revolutionary dentist? I'm a dentist. And I was like, oh, my bad. But he left Paris and went to Lyon, where he studied philosophy, sociology, and psychiatry. There, he studied 2 kinds of psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, and he studied clinical psychiatry. Something about Fanon, some of you may not know, is that he grew up speaking Creole, or what we would call patois, but in the French form. So even though there are a lot of people who present him in a very petty bourgeois, high French way, he wasn't that way. One of the things, though, as you know, patois, Creole, is an Africanized language. And in African languages, and similar, because for instance, if you want to know the other, when I said Bashkuele, that was Mayan. In a lot of the indigenous American languages, in languages of Taino, for instance, as well, there's a metaphysics. And what that involves is you do not separate the person from the body. You see? There's a sense in which who you are is connected. There's a sense in which when I did that heartbeat thing, that connects us. So when Fanon was 14, he had witnessed an autopsy. He was disgusted by it, but it wasn't the gore. What disgusted him was the lack of dignity. He didn't like to see this woman's body probed and opened and all of that. For him, it was an assault on her personhood. And this tells you at the age of 14 is when Fanon realized he was a humanist. For him, the idea of dehumanizing another was revolting.
Right. Thank you very much, Renee. I thought that that little clip that brings together the notion of the way in which the lack of dignity, our dignity, revolted Fanon, the way in which the assault on our personhood revolted Fanon, and then what I thought was the crystallization of all of that, which is the idea of dehumanizing another person, was revolting as well. So you see, he was revolted by those ideas, and it led to his work on the decolonization of our mind. And it worries me deeply that how many years after the end of colonialism, and we're in the stretches of neo-colonialism still, that we can see in our society, we can see the way we treat with our youth, our children, we treat with each other, men and women, as though we lack the dignity. And we are spoken of. Sometimes the language that is used to reference us and what we do and how we can achieve denigrates us and dehumanizes us still. And this is years after independence. And our policymakers and our teachers still use that kind of dehumanizing language. So that as we explore how do we decolonize our mind, I think we can start looking, if we want to do this, chip at it bit by bit, we can start considering the language that we use to speak to our children, to describe them. You hear people saying, this child worth nothing, it's good for nothing. He's a good for nothing child. I mean, how are we removing the dignity of a child using that kind of language? And they're not going to be, you're not going to be worth nothing. You can't achieve anything. And we use that kind of very denigrating language with children and with each other. So when it comes to decolonizing the mind, if we just, as I say, if we're going to take it little by little in little bites, because sometimes these things sound far too big for us to be able to manage. But I like the idea of breaking it down into small bites. And one of those bites is the ability to treat with each other with dignity. Very often, we have, say, for instance, I know Indaba has been talking about crime over the last couple of weeks. And we have a police force, remember the language, that treats with, unfortunately, African people, sometimes with less dignity than they would treat another person in the society who is of a lighter hue, or they believe comes from a different strata and a different status. They have given them a different status in the society. And it's that lack of dignity that we feel we have to treat our young people with, sometimes that results in the seething anger that we see, coming from our young people. And it is an assault on their personhood and on their dignity and so on. And then we have all of these responses of people feeling disrespected and disregarded. So I think in our own, one of the things we can learn from Fanon, and if we take away from Prof's lecture on Sunday, is that we too should be revolted when people speak of us and each other with a lack of dignity and not a little regard for their personhood. And And
Yeah,
do you?
Sister Asha, just want you to comment on a dimension that is not as on that personal level, but it's much deeper, it's much more fundamental, but it also one directly comes out of Fanon's work, and the other one I don't think I had seen a reference to Fanon, but it gives us a sense of Fanonism in it, and that one is a book called Black Christians, White Mission and White Missionaries. And we know that a lot of that derogation of the African and the negation of African values and virtues come out of the white missionary project in Africa and in the diaspora. But there's another work called White Words and Black People. And that one was written by a guy called Chris Searle. I remember his name. I was looking for the book, I couldn't find it, but I remember his name. And he worked in Tobago. He was a white English teacher in Tobago. So that one was directly addressing the way that the English language assaulted the sense of dignity and personhood of Black people, with Tobago as his main project. But he used Fanon, as the basis for understanding, the kind of violence that was inscribed in the language itself, and even in The Wretched of the Earth. I recall that I think it's Jean-Paul Sartre. I might be wrong, but the preface was written, I think, by Sartre.
That's Sartre, yes.
And he said at the time, I'm not giving the numbers because the numbers are outdated, but the percentage I'm going to give you, that 25% of the world's population had what he called the word in capital W, and 75% had the use of the word. And that gives you also a sense of the way that language is colonized and imposed on people for the interest and in the interest of the colonizer. And where you internalize this language so much that you yourself abuse one another with the same language. And I think that is the kind of sense that you're talking about. If I'm wrong, you can correct me there. But I get the sense that that is the kind of thing that we are dealing with, both from a personal interrelational perspective within families and the schools and so on, but also from a deeper psychological and existential perspective from language itself. Not only English, of course, we are dealing with English, but all the European languages would have incorporated the same kind of principles and structured the same way, where Black is demonized.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with Fanon is he helped us to see that we had accepted that and how we had accepted it, and the fact that there was an interesting
but Sister Asha, I don't think it's acceptance, it's brainwashing, it's indoctrination. We have been socialized from children, babies. I think it's time we criminalize the way we socialize babies into white idolatry. But it's from babies, and when you grow up, it's not that it's a choice you have. It's something that it becomes normative.
It becomes.
It's not really a choice.
I was going to say that on Sunday, one of the examples that Professor Gordon gave us was when he said that what struck Fanon is that the psychiatric profession or the medical profession that treated with psychiatry and different illnesses of the mind were actually situating people to accept the barbarity against you, and that in fact, if you objected to that barbarity, then something was wrong with you, not the external environment in which you found yourself. Yes. And this is what happens to us, I think, as a people. That's what colonialism does to us. It forces us to accept that barbarity in terms of language, in terms of behavior, in terms of foods, the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle, and it forces that upon us. And then until we cleanse our minds, of those of what we've accepted as the norm. I had an old colleague who used to say, Asha, it's brainwashing. We really need to have a brain cleansing. But after those things have been forced upon us, then we've got to unravel it all. We're the ones now that have to actually examine all what our behaviors, examine our language, examine our treatment, examine how we love each other. Now, and this is so fundamental because a lot of our school children are at the what shall I say, the receiving end of the hostility of their teachers and their those in authority who cannot see them in that just let me give you a study. A study was done about in Trinidad and Tobago, not external. It looked at what was happening in the schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And the study concluded that children of a darker hue were pushed to sit in the back of the classroom, and the teachers all favored those of a lighter hue. It was done right here. So the damage has been done to our minds, and we've got to decolonize our minds if, in fact, we are going to give our students the kind of attention they deserve, and not criminalize their behavior. I remember hearing somebody saying students, I think it was on your last program, and I totally agreed with that conclusion, and Fanon absolutely would agree with it, that we criminalize our own behavior faster than we would criminalize similar behavior if it happens with people of a lighter skin, or far more people who are white, and so on. So our children are over policed and their behavior is criminalized. Whereas in other situations, it would be another situation, another thing. So part of this dehumanizing, decolonizing our minds, we've got to examine the language we're using with each other. Our children, examine the language, the way we address them, the tone. We have to examine the media. How do they project families? How do they project a loving mother? Are we in that picture? When I say we, African people like ourselves, are there dark people in the picture who are hugging another little dark child and showing that love? Or are we only seeing other people in the commercials who love each other and so on? And we've got to speak up and say, if that's the case, we won't have it.
Let me interject here with the words of Fanon himself and what he said about these matters. To support the claims that you all have made here, both you and Dr. Fergus so far. And Fanon said in his book, The Damned of the Earth, or what we know popularly as the Wretched of the Earth, the Professor Gordon liked damned better as a term, because what we're talking about here is damnation of a people or dehumanization of a people. So Fanon said that under the colonial experience, the native is declared insensible to ethics. He responds not only to the absence of values, he represents not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values. He is, let us dare to admit, the enemy of values, and is, in this sense, he is the absolute evil, the corrosive element, destroying all that comes near him. He is the deforming element, disfiguring all that has to do with beauty or morality. He is the depository of maleficent powers, the unconscious and irretrievable instrument of blind forces. So he starts off by showing you how colonialism...
Shabaka, you need to tell us which work you're referencing, because he has many works on that.
Wretched of the Earth, page 42.
Okay.
And then he goes one step further to speak specifically to how colonialism, and why am I giving this background here? Because this is where our approach to ourselves, the discourse around ourselves, comes from. Fanon goes on to say this speaks to exactly what you're talking about here, Dr. Kambon, and our experience today. He says, The terms the settler uses when he mentions the native are zoological terms. He speaks of the yellow man's reptilian motions, of the stink of the native quarter, of breeding swarms, of foulness of spawn, of gesticulations. When the settler seeks to describe the native fully in exact terms, he constantly refers to the bestiary, right? And he goes on to say,
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
he goes on to say
We
that,
talked about our children as wild. These children have to be controlled. They're too wild. You know, they should be punished. They should be. Some are calling for their incarceration. We're back to square one.
yeah, he talks about the hysterical masses, the faces bereft of humanity, the distended bodies. One of the interesting terms we use today very often is the word female and male. The way we use female and male is a very zoological context. It's becoming more and more popular on radio and in popular discourse. Two females. I saw two females and two males going down the road, right? And and Fanon points out that all this becomes part of the, forms part of the colonial vocabulary. But Fanon goes on to talk about how we resist this colonial aggression through vocabulary, what we call epistemic violence. And I don't know why in 2025 this is not part of our understanding of how we get to this point. But unfortunately, we're at that point now where that conversation, that discourse, cockroaches, and all kinds of language, what Fanon calls zoological terms, are still used to describe the natives, the non, those who have not acceded to whiteness in the society. And of course, that language, what immediately follows from that language, according to Fanon's work.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, so I'm saying that the language is the forerunner to the policies of violence. The language, the aggressive language, actually is the forerunner to the policies of violence, right? And this is how colonialism works. Columbus comes here
and
humanizes the natives. He establishes that they are not equal human beings to his own people. And that then becomes the basis on which to deny them all the benefits of civilization at that point in time. And so we have to be very, very careful. That's a very, very strong point for us to pay very close attention to.
We must. If we're talking about decolonizing the mind, it is our duty and obligation to pull people's socks up when they refer to our children, refer to our neighbors, refer to ourselves, refer to our loved ones in that kind of language. And that's something we can control, and that's something we can influence. So I think that's to me that's lesson one from Professor Gordon's discourse on Fanon. Lesson one from Fanon.
I think in that very clip that you played at the beginning of the program, Professor Gordon establishes that Fanon himself represents something that can boost our self-esteem, that can boost our own sense of our own humanity. Fanon himself, the burying and erasing of people like Fanon from our own history is part of the process of diminishing us as a people here. Now, not just as African people, Caribbean people across the board. Fanon was a young man born under colonialism, 1925. He was a footballer or an athlete, a playwright, a soldier, a doctor of psychology, a scholar with philosophy, sociology, psychiatry, forensic, and clinical, right? So he was all these things, a complete Renaissance man, and he wasn't the only one. You look across the African world at that time, and you see people like that brother in North America. What's his name? Who's the American footballer? the actor,
Oh,
singer,
the singer,
yes,
Paul Robeson,
Paul
yes, who
that
was
same
an
vein, that
amazing
same
athlete,
tradition.
and
And
yes.
these, when you remove the best of us from the
Mhm.
children, from them being able to see, all they get to see is enslavement and poverty. They
Yes.
don't know of all the great people across the Americas, across the Caribbean first, then the
Mhm.
rest of the Americas, who have risen out of this condition to become these great African Renaissance men and women, and who have not just achieved in terms of their academics and in terms of their sport, but also in terms of challenging the system that keeps their people down, and changing the world to make the world a better place. And so I thought that in itself was very important. And also another interesting point that
Mhm.
the professor raised in that area, I thought was quite interesting. He talked about Fanon's wife, Josie. Fanon married Josie. She was Roma and Corsican, and therefore she was black in Europe. But when they had to travel to the United States for him to get treatment into the south of the United States, in particular, she would have immediately become white. And in some states in the United States where there were anti-miscegenation laws, that is, laws that criminalized relationships between blacks and whites, particularly black men and white women, their relationship would have been illegal. So that was a very interesting point.
Yes, and
So
I think in him um, uh, giving us some sense of how Fanon came to all these perspectives about uh, the dehumanization of others. He pointed out that he went to war. He was also one of those people who left for, Martinique to fight with the French and for the French army. And then when he realized the way that interestingly they said first that he was treated as an object that could be used, which is the way African American soldiers were used in the Vietnam War as objects,
Caribbean soldiers as well. When
and Caribbean soldiers
Butler
in World
and
War One and World War Two.
Dr. Fergus is probably the man to give you the exact quotation, but when our soldiers went to fight in World War One, Alfred Milner, whose name we fought so successfully to have removed, Dr.
Punch.
Fergus and I, to have removed from the oldest Hall of Residence in the University of West Indies. He wrote from his position at that point, I think it was in the colonial office, to Caribbean colonizers, telling them to be careful of our soldiers who were coming back, because our soldiers had been so mistreated and had challenged their white counterparts to such an extent that he felt that they had lost the thing that colonialism wanted them to have, which was their fear and respect for white people. He said that they were coming back home without that sense of awe and fear for white people, and they were going to pose a threat to the colonial establishment back in the Caribbean. And he sent a warship on alert to Jamaica, and actually gave the colonial authorities the names of our ex-soldiers to look out for them. So I think the experience of Africans always fighting alongside Europeans would have always radicalized them in certain ways. Any illusions they had about empire, they would have lost. And as the professor puts it, the lie
Okay,
of
everybody has come back.
blackness as superior and inferior, those things would have been challenged in that experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. So I think this is
Shabaka,
a great
actually,
explanation.
the black soldiers weren't allowed to fight because a lot of them were not allowed to fight. We have to understand that. A lot of them were taken to war, but to dig ditches and to work in the kitchens
Yeah.
or the mess, as they call it, and all those things. A lot of them died, but mainly the whites from the colonies who were allowed to fight, with the white soldiers. They did not want black people killing white people. So that operated almost throughout World War One. Wherever black people fighting, they might have deployed them in wars in Africa and so on, in the Middle East. But in Europe itself, they were not allowed to engage in frontline combats and so on. So the racism was there from the beginning. They were afraid and they did not want to know that, black people would kill white people because they might go back, as you say, in the colonies and realize, white people could die easily too.
So, you know what I have never heard before? Professor Lewis pointed out that the women, African women from the Caribbean who volunteered to fight in World War II, were asked, they were not given the opportunity to fight either, as you say, but they were asked to go and sleep in the beds of the white officers.
Yeah.
I thought that was another
dehumanization.
These are the kinds of conversations. This is what disturbs me about our Memorial Days. We have these Memorial Days where we celebrate, veterans who went to fight in World War II and World War One, but we do not speak about their experiences in those fights.
Their hardships.
In a sense, our celebration of Memorial Day is a form of deception, an ongoing, active form of deception in this country,
and actually to make colonialism look good, when in fact it was not good.
Well,
but
we were fighting fascism, and we should be applauded for it when we fought fascism in Europe. But the brothers and sisters who stayed here to fight fascism in this part of the world, right here in the Caribbean, we don't remember them. Something is disturbing about that in the very first place, But I think that all these things come into contrast when we begin to discuss our history. Our history is one that is, and I'm sure nobody here would disagree with me. The way that we remember the past is through a colonial lens, and so when we see the truth, it's always a shock to us.
Yes. And yeah. May I just give a plug for the rest of our Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series? We just had the launch, but we are headed now into the next 3 lectures that form part of this series. And so our next session will be looking at the miseducation of the African child. And that takes its tenor and tone from the piece of work by Professor Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, and also by that amazing music from Lauryn Hill, which we'll play some of that music when we do the miseducation of the African child, called The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. So that's for the young people. We can let them listen to their own music to understand why this is such an important topic. And then that's June 29th, and all of the series will be at 5 o'clock in the evening. They will be online. So do please go to the YouTube channel or ESCTT Facebook. On July 6th, we're looking at reparations and reparatory justice, the end or the beginning. And our good Dr. Fergus, who's here with us, of course, he's going to speak on that panel. Can't talk about reparations without him. And we'll also have Mr. McEachran from the UN Forum for People of African Descent. And he's going to be coming out of Geneva. So it's online. It should be a very interesting discussion. And we close on July 13th, Decoding Public Spaces. Shabaka will lead that panel, and it should be quite an interesting series of all of it, looking at decolonizing the mind in different areas of our lives. I should say that Miseducation of the African Child panel, taking place on June 29th, will have amazing teachers and students in that discussion. So that discussion is going to be undertaken by teachers and students. And we look forward to that discussion on the 29th of June.
Yeah, a couple of questions or comments on the
Yes.
on the Fanon's ideas on decolonizing the mind. But before I say that, when you started the clip, you started with the part where Professor Gordon was talking about the name of the club that that Fanon would have formed, and it instantly reminded me of a club that was formed, a cricket club that had a similar play on words in Trinidad in the 1890s called Stingo. That club was Stingo. Right, people like Larry Constantine and they would have been, nurtured by in that club. Stingo, when it emerged, it soon enough became the dominant club, winning every competition. They called it the Challenge Cup. For every season, that is every year for about 5 to 6 years, Stingo. So when Stingo, they had the greatest fast bowlers. Our first generation of West Indian fast bowlers came out of the Stingo club. So that name, Assault and Stingo, I thought, that whoever came up with those names must have been thinking perhaps similarly, that they needed a name to confront the racism in the sport, head on. Yes. So let me just move away from that. Before, around the same time, this guy was a contemporary of Fanon. He was also living in North Africa. Well, Fanon, of course, went to North Africa. But this guy called Albert Memmi was a resident. Well, he was born in Tunisia. Tunisia, of course, is next door to Algeria. And he was writing in 1957. So it's around the same time that we see Fanon writing for the FLN, the Algerian Liberation Front. I don't know if they knew one another, if their work intersected, but some of the ideas were so close, confronting colonial violence. I thought that was interesting. Perhaps we should also combine that kind of work with Fanon to have an idea what was happening around that time. That decade in the early post-World War II period when, the nationalism became much more radical and revolutionary. And so I thought I wouldn't go into details in it. I have the book in front of me here, but I wouldn't. I know time is running.
The colonizer and the colonizer?
But I want to ask you. I am not going to read it because I want to ask you a question.
Tell me.
Now, I agree with Gordon about the translation of the name of Fanon's title to his book. La Dame could not have meant wretched. I think the translation was consistent with the time and so on, or whoever did it. It's a kind of self-censorship perhaps, because the French have a more appropriate word for wretched, misérable. In fact, I think there's a book called Les Miserables that I read as a teenager, Les Miserables. The miserable people, the wretched people. And this is more than that. In fact, I think it was even, it's more deeply existential than even damned. But, damned captures the title more than wretched. But I wouldn't go into that. What I want to ask you is this. Considering that this work was translated into English only in 1968, the Wretched of the Youth I'm talking about, right? Sorry, the cold is giving me
Yes, I'm feeling for
but
you.
But it would have been, I don't know if it was available, I don't know if it was banned or censored, but do you know if there was any impact of the work in the Francophone Caribbean? These people could have read the work immediately upon its publication. Do you know if there was any at all?
Yes, I think there was. I think he reached the French, the Francophone, both Africa and the Caribbean, before we got that sense of him, because first it was published in French and then subsequently in English, then the translation. So I would think that, and I'm trying to remember the name of a Martinican scholar whose work, who commented on Fanon in the early period. So, yes, I would believe, I'll go back and check to get the exact, but I do believe it would have impacted the French and speaking Caribbean and the Francophone Africa before we got the sense of it. But Gordon says he absolutely disagrees with that titling, and he thinks it was part of the white French prospects for a deliberate translation in that regard, because they still held the colonized view that we were wretched, when that was not Fanon's notion of us at all. We were being deprived and being dehumanized, but not we ourselves were not wretched.
Yeah, but when we come to the translation, we can't blame the French publishers, huh? We have to think about the English publishers. Who were the English publishers, and how did they relate to works by Black people challenged and confronted the system? Because we know people had a lot of difficulty publishing books that confronted the system. A lot of problems. They just sometimes will not publish your work. In fact, we know they would not even give you your PhD if you had a certain dissertation that confronted and overturned the colonialist and imperialist narrative. We know that. Yes, so we have to look at the English publishing house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I just want to share with you that the name Wretched of the Earth actually comes from the title or line in the poem called Arise Ye Wretched of the Earth by Haitian communist intellectual Jacques Romain. And in that poem, he talks about, he has a line where he talks about the people, the filthy Negroes, filthy Indians, filthy Hindus, filthy Indo-Chinese, filthy Arabs, filthy Malays, filthy Jews, filthy proletarians. All here we are arisen, all the wretched of the earth, all the upholders of justice, marching to attack your barracks, your banks, like a forest of funeral torches to be done. That's the line, I think, where the wretched of the earth comes from.
Yes, but I think, be careful, because I think Gordon was saying that the actual translation of that is the damned of the earth. And that was what Fanon wanted the book to be called, The Damned of the Earth, because he was taking it from that Haitian writer who spoke of these people, all these various peoples, as being damned. And the other writers switched it from damned to wretched, and they didn't give the credit to Fanon for quoting a Haitian author. You see, because of course, as far as they're concerned, you can't have a Haitian author that ought to.
No, but this is the Haitian author's works. The wretched of the earth comes from the Haitian author.
Yes,
but I think that the people who he calls wretched, the word damned really strongly speaks to their experience, the experience of their lives. Fanon says that the thing about the colonized world, the most important thing in the colonized world that can decide your existence is whether you belong to this group or that group. Mm-hmm. Whether you belong to the settler or the native determines your outcome. Yes. It's the strongest determinant of your outcome. And so once you belong to the native, you are damned.
You're damned.
But absolutely. All the natives, in this poem, are described as the wretched of the earth. So I'm not so I understand how damned could feel like a stronger word to use, but I think wretched is of the earth, when we look at it in the context in which it is used here, is also powerful.
Good. Okay. Gentlemen, I think it is 9:28, so I think your time has vanished. I just want to encourage people. What can we say? We've got to encourage people to read. We've got to encourage the people to come out, listen to the Indaba, get a sense of what's happening. I mean, you learn so much from Indaba. It's wonderful. I have to congratulate both the hosts, Dr. Fergus, Shabaka, Renee. You all are doing a wonderful job. I want to encourage people to participate in the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series and to urge everyone who you know who's in policy making to get rid of Oxford Street and give us Kwame Ture Street, please. So thank you very much.
Indeed. And of course, Dr. Fergus, I'll leave the last word to you. I will just quote Frantz Fanon, talking about Fanon tonight. Fanon left us with an imperative which we must always keep close to our hearts. He said, history is waiting for something from us other than the nauseating mimicry of Europe, which he called an obscene caricature. When he saw us walking around, dressed up like Europeans in 100 degree
100% wool in hot countries. And now men want to go back to 3-piece suits. So you've got a shirt, you've got a t-shirt, a shirt.
He described this, and in all the forms, in not just in dress, but in all the forms that we have tried to mimic as an obscene caricature. And he said history was waiting for something other than this nauseating mimicry to advance humanity one step further. Something to keep in mind tonight.
Okay, we have referenced mostly, all of the references I think would have focused on one of Fanon's works, The Wretched of the Earth, but I would advise people, I'd persuade you really to try and read some of his other work, especially the one called Black Skin, White Mask. I think that to me will give you a much more fundamental understanding of the real problems, the psychological violence of colonialism, and how it expresses itself today, because we live that reality today. Black skin, white mask. So I think everybody should read that book. If
Maybe
you really want to deal with the problem of decolonizing the mind, you have to read that book. You must read that book. The Wretched of the Earth is more challenging.
Let's challenge them to read it in time for next week. So next week we're going to explore.
Well, for one thing, let me say this as you say that, because the book might be difficult to get, but Black Skin, White Mask is available online free.
Online,
so you can. Yeah, it's online free. I was able to get when some student took mine, some student, you lend out these books and you never get them back. Yeah, I had all those. I ended up with just one, but I was able to get a free copy on the internet, a PDF copy.
Yes.
On the internet. So if you look for Black Skin, White Mask, you should get a copy, a freely downloadable copy on the internet. I would strongly advise you to read it if you're really serious in understanding the condition of the mind from colonialism and interested in decolonizing the mind. You should read it. The Wretched of the Earth is a much more sort of in a sense, sophisticated book in terms of language, because it deals a lot more with philosophy and psychiatry and so on. But Black and White Mask, I would say that it's easier to digest, and I think you would really enjoy reading it. Enjoy it in the sense of an intellectual, because it's a book that could really trouble the mind as well. Yeah, so. Sister Asha said read for next week. So let's see how many people at least started reading. I am saying at least start reading. She says start and finish, but I'm saying at least start reading, or at least At
Right.
least if we ask you, tell us you got a copy of the book and you
Yes,
intend to read it. And you intend to read it. Yes, it's online. It's available for download. So look for it. And you can have a collection of those, of decolonizing books in a folder that you would read or refer to. Sometimes they could become a reference point. You collect them, download. That's what I do. I have a ton load of those things, internet books. I download, and they help in doing the research, because if you have the printed text, of course you have to read. Sometimes what you're looking for might be towards the end, and you have to read the whole thing. But if you have the digitized copy, it's easy to find what you're looking for. So the digitized copy, has a lot of advantages. So download your copy, and you hear Shabaka say something like, "Go and look for it, read it." Go and look for it, read it. Yes. So you have to educate yourself. You can't wait on others to do the job for you. You have a responsibility to want to know, to want to decolonize your mind, even to understand what is colonization of the mind. That's the first thing. What is this thing? Right? Am I really a colonized person from the way I think and the values I have and so on? The way I relate to people? Am I colonized because I might be thinking I'm liberated, I'm emancipated? So you need to read to understand the extent to which you are still enslaved by, the strategies that were deployed and have you almost remotely, enslaving yourself.
That's right. That's right.
All right then.
Good going.
So we come back next week.
Right.
We come back next week. Don't forget the Africa Report is back next week. We look at the Algerian Revolution.
Excellent. Excellent.
So we
Good
invite
night.
our audience to join us again next week for another edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Good night.
Good night. Good night.